I want to bring in my guests. I am joined with the one and only, the man himself, Garland Nixon. Garland Nixon is a political analyst, and Garland Nixon has his own show that you guys should check out. That show is booming. Garland, it can be found on Garland Nixon on YouTube, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Yeah, I was checking it out yesterday. Yeah, man, you're blowing up on that channel.
I'm having a lot of fun. I'm having really good guests. As Casey Stengel said, when the Yankees had all of these, like 5 of the best players in all of baseball, and they win all these championships, and someone referred to him as a genius and asked him about being a baseball genius, and he says, being a genius is the art of taking credit for all the home runs that somebody else hit. So I bring on Scott Ritter and Ray McGovern, these guys, and people say, "That's what a brilliant job." I'm like, yeah, that's what he said. As Steve Carell always said, that's what she said, right?
That's what she said. No, I would say take credit yourself. You've been doing God's work, man, and honestly, you always have. Ever since I've known you, and like I said, I've always appreciated you pulling me into radio, and it's for the longest time I just considered I'm doing Garland's show. I'm doing Garland's show. No, man, I definitely appreciate you joining me, especially this early in the morning. One of the stories I wanted to hit, I have to hit this.
Yeah.
So CNN is trash. I want to go there first. CNN is trash. I'm sorry. So they have, ever since Syria. In fact, let me do this first. Let me get your take on the fall of Syria. I don't think I've ever asked you about this before we move into other issues.
Well, I think this, there's 2 ways to look at it. There's short term and long term, right? In the short term, the Israelis and the US are, they're clapping. Hooray, look what we did. We've been wanting to take down Syria for all of these times. So we finally got what we wanted, and of course, be careful what you pray for.
That's right.
You might just get it. And now Israel is happy to have a failed state that's run by ISIS on their border. Turkey, a failed state that's infested with ISIS on their border. I can't see where that's going to be a long-term benefit for anyone. Exactly. And that, what ISIS, the other thing is this. These ISIS groups are always fighting amongst each other. They're unstable. So you'll have maybe the leadership that say, we made a deal with the US and Israel, and so therefore we're not going to go after them in return for them, blah, blah, blah. But within ISIS, there'll be other groups that say, screw that. We're doing the work of, what Allah or whatever. And that means that we have to fill in the blank. They'll be blowing up things in Israel. They'll be doing terrorism in Turkey. All of their so-called friends. So they're going to be really sorry that they have done this. Really sorry, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was thinking something similar. Because my thought was, people were saying, well, Israel's supporting Al-Qaeda. And I was like, well, I don't know if they're supporting Al-Qaeda. I think they're supporting chaos. Like, I think they're fine with, okay, this group is undermining Assad. This group is attacking Assad. Oh, yeah, Netanyahu is going to show up at the hospital. We're going to give them, accolades and everything else. But the reality of it is, they don't want, at least I don't think they would want a terrorist state on their border. And they may be buddies now, but who the hell knows what that's going to look like later? I mean, especially if that country becomes a basket case and that stuff starts to spread in the other areas. I mean, is it really that difficult for a Muslim group of extremists to look at Israel and think to themselves, maybe we need to liberate that area?
Oh, yeah. Well, how about this? And that's the part of it. Well, maybe the leaders won't, but within that, look at Libya. What do you have? You have the certain sections that are run by certain warlords and certain groups, and they're fighting amongst each other, and they don't agree on anything. And one of the things that I think it's going to be instability for Egypt and Saudi Arabia. There'll be groups in there saying, Saudi Arabia has Mecca and Medina. We need to go overthrow the government there. I mean, hey, we've got our country here. Why not Saudi? And we can get Mecca and Medina. It's going to be hell for the region. There will be big sorrow. And the time will come when the powers that be will have to try to go back into Syria and wrestle power from these crazies. And it ain't going to be easy. So, they've opened a can of worms that is going to cost them a lot of heartache in the long run.
Yeah. But see, part of me thinks that was the point, that nobody was ever going to allow a terrorist state to run a country. At least that was my thought, that this was
Mhm.
always going to collapse. That all
Mhm.
of these groups, I mean, you have all of these groups that are rivaling for power at this point. I mean, like, Jelani has been like, yeah, everything, we should be peace and love. We should love the gays and love the other groups and everything else. And you have some of these other groups that are, still killing people. They're taking
Right.
people and dragging them through the streets. I mean, some of that stuff is heart-wrenching, that's taking place. And so he, this notion that he has full control over all of this stuff, that's no, nobody,
Right.
none of these groups need to necessarily accept his power. One of the other interesting things is Blinken is running to Turkey today. And part of the reason that he's doing so is because Turkish-backed groups are beating the hell out of the Kurds. So one of the things that we're pointing out, the Kurds were also fighting the Syrian government in many respects. And in some cases, I guess they were fighting both. But interestingly enough, the Kurds have asked Israel for help against the Turkish-backed groups because they are concerned that they're basically getting beat, that they're going to get and take over. Blinken is going to Turkey to have that negotiation to try to bring and mend fences to try to get Erdogan to pull the chain on his jihadis. Like, I don't know. I don't think they have control over this,
Yeah.
So there's that part.
Uh, uh,
No,
oh, I was going
please.
to add this. See, don't you get the feeling that they're doing all of these things to spite Trump, to create
Yes.
instability? It's like, we only got 6 weeks. We've got to have martial law in South Korea so we can start a war on the Korean Peninsula.
Yes.
Oh, wait, we've got to throw some attackums at Russia so maybe they'll overreact and then we can stop Trump from getting maybe a deal there. Oh my gosh. Trump has said, whether he meant it or not, well, we'd like to you get a ceasefire. And he has said that he wants to turn down the volume in Middle East. I get the
Yes, he did.
feeling that Trump wants to turn down the foreign policy volume so he can focus on America. I really get this feeling, good, bad, or indifferent. But I get the feeling he wants to do that. And so I think they're like, yes, we'll cause chaos in Syria and that'll screw up Trump's plan for anything in the Middle East. You know what I mean? They didn't think that's January 20th. And that I just think Israel, Saudi Arabia, Turkey are going to be very, very sorry that this happened. I think Saudi Arabia is not all that happy with it anyway, because these jihad, it's always been a country that was protected by the U.S. The royal family was protected by the U.S. and Britain. And what happens if you get people in that you can't negotiate with because they're doing God's work? They don't negotiate with you. And you make a deal with this group, but the ones over here say, screw that. They're not properly doing God's work. So we got to go kill whoever it is we kill. And it's going to be a bad situation there at some point. And of course, you feel sorry for the Syrian people because they're the ones that, who the hell wants these people in your country running things? If you remember, so when I learned a lot about the Middle East was when I studied Iraq. And what I found out was even Saddam Hussein, the way he maintained power, he went around the country. There were various warlords and tribal leaders, and he would buy them off, bribe them off, make deals with them because he understood you're not going to run everything. And that's when I started doing, oh, that's how the leaders in the Middle East, they have tribal chieftains and things, right? So it's normal for the leader of a country, even a strongman leader, to say, I understand there are various factions, sects, and things I got to deal with. When you don't really have a leader, you still have the various factions and sects, but you have nobody to make a deal and to bring them all together into one group. And so they just go in all different directions. And some of these directions are going to be real bad for it. Some of them are going to hate Israel. And they're going to say, how can we attack them? And you're not going to be able to strike a deal with them.
By the way, we were doing the same thing in Afghanistan. We were paying warlords. Also, I think what was New York Times came out with that story, the warlord that we were paying, that brutal, vicious guy. And despite Trump, yes, I said the same thing, that all of these conflicts, they're not disparate conflicts, like that these things are related. Like Donald Trump, well, he was willing to make peace with North Korea, Kim Jong-un. And then all of a sudden, you have South Korean leader saying something like, why are we having this war with China? Why are we getting into this? And all of a sudden, oh, these people are clearly working for North Korea. We need to overthrow the government. And the U.S. is completely quiet, doesn't say squat. And then afterwards, it's like, we are glad that they resolved this issue. Yeah, buddy, you didn't think that they were going to be a consistent ally and that they might actually buck the trend of being this kind of platform to attack China. Same thing with Europe, where you get the Romanian court coming through, killing the guy's election, just blowing the election off in Georgia, them trying to overthrow the government. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think any of this stuff. And if you remember, when Donald Trump came in last time, he stopped Obama's regime change war. He basically killed that program, in which case the New York Times all of a sudden discovered, oh, look at here. We've all of a sudden discovered a program where Obama was paying $1 billion to overthrow the Syrian government. No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, just like the Gazprom thing, where Joe Biden is now talking about putting sanctions on Russian gas and Russian oil, something that he wouldn't do over the course of the administration because he was concerned about like inflation and is concerned about foreign policy implications. Well, he is on his way out now, so he doesn't really care. He's leaving it back to Trump. No, man.
He wants inflation. He's doing it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. For Trump.
Wants to create, yeah, right. Rather than like not worrying about it, he's like, hey, how can we make life hell for Trump? I know, we'll do this. It'll drive up inflation. You know, screw the American people, let them suffer. Who cares, right? But what's important is it'll make Trump's life miserable. You know, and it just shows the cynicism. You know what I was talking about the other day? I did a show where I talked about this. Like the masks are off for this last 2-month period after they lost. And they were like before, like, you know, we have to be the liberal interventionists. We're overthrowing this country to help the LGBT community. We're overthrowing this country to bring democracy or this. And now they're like, oh, crap, we lost. Screw it. We'll just do evil because we're evil. Who cares? We don't have to pretend anymore. Let's just do a full out overthrow of the South Korean democracy complete. So it's like, at least you're looking at him. You're like, yeah, this is who Tony Blinken is. All right. This makes sense.
And you know, as well, the media doesn't even give you any wider context to that. It's just, oh, look at here. This is purely coincidental that they just declared a dictatorship. And this was one of the countries that Donald Trump was willing to go to make peace. This is very strange. And look at here. Here's another country that Donald Trump ended a regime change war. But all of a sudden things just happen. Like it is so maddening watching US media on this stuff. And it's even more maddening on Syria in the way that they cheer it. If you remember, like CNN did this interview with Jelani, where it was the softball interview of a jihadist. It would be like if you were interviewing a Nazi and you don't bring up the fact that they're a Nazi. It is very bizarre. It's like, yeah, I went through this phase while I was chopping off heads, but you know, that was just my 20s and now I'm a better person. Okay. Sure. And that was this kind of like, oh, I've changed, I've moderated, I'm diversity friendly now. I just want a free democratic Syria. I just believe in joy. It is the wildest
Jaguar advertisement. That's what ISIS going to have a Jaguar advertisement where a bunch of people in different colors come out and they play some weird techno music or something. They're going to like cut off the head of a I don't know, a dummy or something like that, you know. They're going to change the ISIS flag. It'll be like a rainbow flag. And it'll be just like an I and an S at the beginning, like Jaguar has the J and the G. That's what, in fact, they'll probably get like Jaguars, pub PR people will move to Syria and be hired by ISIS. I think that's the direction.
Oh, you don't even need Jaguars people. You have CNN to do that.
Yeah, right.
CNN, and I want to play this clip. This is Ritter, when he was on the show the other day. Ritter had said something. I think he was on Judge Natch, and I asked him to expand upon it because it is wild. And it puts what I'm going to show in context. He was talking about how, you know, when he was a weapons inspector, that CNN, they had already prepared a war room, even though the war hadn't even started yet, that they were basically working arm in arm with the CIA in order to sell the war. This is Ritter. Listen to what he says here. One last question. It's something you said about CNN. CNN interviewed Jelani, and they basically interviewing a terrorist to softball the fact that the man was a head chopping terrorist. You pointed out that you were in the room as they were setting up, I guess, propaganda exercises like that. Could you go into that? We have about 1 or 2 minutes before the next guest comes on, but please go into that.
No, just in 2002, I was invited to the headquarters of CNN in Atlanta. I had just come back from Iraq, where I spoke to the parliament, and also had just, I'd been advocating for the return of weapons inspectors, and then, Saddam Hussein said we're going to let weapons inspectors back in, and I take credit for at least playing a part in putting that thought in the minds of the Iraqi government and helping convince them it's the right thing to do. So CNN, after attacking me, brought me in and had a a big panel who interviewed me and all that. And the CEO and the director of their news operations stands up and goes, Scott Ritter is cleared now. He can go on. He's passed the purity test. And then he takes me and he goes, let me show you what we're doing here. And he takes me and he shows me the war room. And we're talking October 2002. The war room. Already hotlines to the Pentagon, already reporters getting trained and prepared to be embedded in invasion forces. CNN is getting ready to be the propaganda arm of the Defense Department as they go into an Iraqi invasion that hadn't been approved yet. Hadn't been officially approved. The president was still saying we're working for peace, but CNN already knows what the outcome is going to be. They're preferred. I was also working with CNN, or when the CIA brought CNN in when I was a weapons inspector to create a propaganda film about the weapons inspections. CNN and the CIA are the same, and this.
CNN and CIA are the same. All right, so Ritter is effectively saying, look, these groups work arm in arm. They're working in tandem. So when I see this woman, this is Clarissa Ward. Clarissa Ward at one point talked about how she was, I want to use the term radicalized. She didn't use the term radicalized. I'm using that term. But effectively saying that she didn't believe that the administration was doing enough against Syria, meaning she's a news person saying, I didn't believe that the administration was doing enough. And she starts sending nasty emails to some of the people in power because they weren't doing enough in Syria. She goes, this is the same woman who smelled or sniffed the Syrian chemical weapons thing. And she was like sniffing garments that were supposed to be infected with chemical weapons. She was the one that had the fake Hamas attack where she dives to the ground even though nobody was hitting her. So she is now in Syria doing propaganda work. They have already cleared the prisons. Several days later, after they cleared the prisons, she shows up at the prisons and finds a guy, just so happened, in the prison lying on the mat. This is just outrageous. I mean, I'm going to play this.
I can't tell, though. It might just be a blanket. But it's the only cell that's long. Is he going to shoot it?
The guard makes us turn the camera off while he shoots the lock off the cell door. We go in to get a closer look. It's still not clear if there is something under the blanket.
Oh, it moved. Is there someone there?
And then she proceeds to have a conversation with the guy that she finds under the blanket 5 days later after everybody had been cleared from the prisons. One of the first thing they did was empty the prisons. And yet they have to shoot it open, go in. It's clearly an empty prison, but there's one guy left. He just didn't want to leave. This is outrageous. Like, they are selling the stuff to the public as if this is such a great day while completely ignoring the people who are being killed, the people who are being stabbed, shot, dragged through the streets, the ISIS flags that are being raised. I mean, they're ignoring all of the horrible stuff that is happening right now and focusing on, here's a guy that was in prison. Here's a woman who speaks perfect English, who said she loves to be under an Islamic law state. Give me a take on this, Garland.
Two things. Number one, and this is from my, in law enforcement, and I've trained firearms and trained people and all of that. You know how you're watching a movie and there's some guy and he's 6'5" and he's 285 pounds of solid muscle, and the woman who's the star walks up behind him and hits him in the back of the neck somewhere with a karate chop about this hard, and he goes down and he's unconscious. Like in the movies, all you have to do is like go boink in somebody's back and they go down and they're unconscious, right? And then she picks up his gun and moves along, right? That's the equivalent of shooting a lock off of it. That's the stupidest thing in the world. Think about this. You are in a room and you're firing a weapon and you don't know where that bullet's going to go. And you're going to shoot it and it's going to ricochet off of that lock and go ping, 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 ping. And you're likely to get hit by it at some point and killed. Number one. Number two, the round in your weapon is made of lead, which is a soft metal. And locks are made of really super hardened steel. If you shoot a lock with a weapon, you're not shooting the lock off. The bullet is going to break up, ricochet, fragment, and the lock is going to have a smudge on it at the most. So this is a fake thing that you would do in a movie. You know what they should have did? They should have had 10 ISIS guys run at her, and she should have like chopped them and went blink. And they should have all like passed out immediately from the power of her mighty chop. It's an absurdity. He shot the lock off. Number one, in Syria, they don't, what do they hang a master lock on the jail? When they showed it, the jail slide closed, and they have like internal locks where the thing comes out. This slides into the wall, and this thing like locks in, right? So where does the bullet shoot the lock off? There's not a lock to be shot off. It goes into the wall. So yes, they shot the lock off, which shows you that this is a staged fraud. It's just like Hollywood. There's no such thing as shooting locks off. You don't shoot locks off. You can't shoot a lock off. You can't shoot. It would be like, yes, he took a baseball bat and knocked the hardened steel lock off. It's absurd. So what we're looking at is here. So let me simplify. It's like you said. The reason that people are watching Jamal Thomas and Garland Nixon and Jimmy Dore and George Galloway and Alexander McCorris is because of that crap. Everybody, you know, I always say I'm not like some genius philosopher. The people like us are regular everyday people who try to read and figure these things out. And regular everyday people can look at CNN and figure out at some point, well, this is not media. This is a propaganda operation for the U.S. empire. That's all it is. It's an imperial propaganda operation. People have figured it out, and now they'd rather watch Jamal Thomas in the morning because while Jamal Thomas is, you know, doesn't have 10 years and as the director of national intelligence like half of the people on CNN, he can read and figure things out, and at least he's trying to be honest. It's what a joke to watch that. It's absurd.
Yeah.
And wait a minute. They're not scared of ISIS. They're going to Syria, and they're not afraid of violence. Someone has guaranteed their security, so they don't have to worry about terrorism or anything. So that's it. We don't have media anymore in the United States. We have intelligence operations. We have propaganda. This is Voice of America disguised as CNN, MSNBC, Fox, etc. And that's why in the tens of thousands, they're out of there, and they're watching regular old people like us who have a bookshelf or something in the back, you know, in an old broken down drone.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's pretty wild when you think about it. I guess I didn't even notice the lock thing. Your former profession gave you that take. I was a software engineer, so
Shot the lock off.
Yeah, she shot the lock. Like, it's a Hollywood thing. That's a movie thing, right? That's what you do in the movies where you're like, you need to get the person out. You just shoots the lock and the door opens and you grab the person and you go. And in real life, yeah, Ricochet, they were concerned about that. They were concerned about any of that stuff. Who knows where that bullet would have went? What if he would have missed? Like I don't know if you do that in real life.
Never.
Yeah.
Never. Who would shoot? And like locks are hardened steel. And they're harder than bullets. I mean, that's what they're made for. It's a lock. Even a cheap master lock is hardened steel. And what is a bullet? It's lead. And even if it was a full metal jacketed bullet, what are the odds that you're going to hit it just in the right spot? And what is the right spot? And is it like, can you jar? I mean, it's just absurd, other than in a Hollywood movie, to say that somebody shot the lock off. And even when you saw them open the door, there was not like a little hinge with like where the lock used to be. It goes into the wall. The lock is in the wall. The locking mechanism is on the wall. Would you shoot the wall?
But again, like I said, St. Clarissa Ward, same person who said she was radicalized in Syria, and I'm using the term radicalized because she effectively said, "Look, I thought that our administration wasn't doing enough in Syria," and it's like, what? Who the hell are you? Like, how are you a journalist and your response is, we should be doing more here? You're supposed to just be reporting. You're supposed to be on the ground. You're not supposed to be an asset working to try to overthrow a government, for God's sake. It's just outrageous. And so now, I suppose, this is her moment. She's like, I always thought we should have been more involved. I always thought we should have been trying to overthrow that government. And damn it, now that he's gone, it's my time to shine. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do the CIA's work. Yeah, I agree with you, man. It is absurd. It is outrageous. And it comes across purely as a movie set. It looks like, and maybe that's why they do it that way. Like, meaning, it's kind of like if you wanted to trick people, you trick them with what they're familiar with. And what they're familiar with is, in the movies, you shoot the lock. It's that stuff. No, I agree with you.
Yeah, it's, but you know, it's good to me in a way. It's good because people need to see and understand the absurdities. They need to understand that when you have a so-called media, and the media's position is always more aggression, not less. You'll never hear someone from CNN say, you know, perhaps we went a little too far when it came to invading this country, attacking a bomb. Never. You know, their job is always to say, we need to put our foot on the gas a little bit. What do you think about country X? Well, we really need to get involved and do more. What about country Y? Get involved and do more. Country Z. Why do I have to tell you? Get involved and do more.
Right.
And people are sick and tired of. And now our next guest, retired General so-and-so, who will be interviewing retired CIA chief so-and-so, who will be here along with retired naval lab. And you're like, could you possibly have somebody on here who would ever push back? No, never.
Well, Operation Mockingbird, those people were basically being paid. I mean, you had like CIA influence in media and television. I mean, just in all sorts of fields. I mean, Ken Delanian was getting his stories vetted by the CIA. He got fired from the LA Times for doing that. So, you know, these people have their sources, meaning they have people who would say, hey, here's a story that I want you to put out. Is it true? It's a source, an anonymous source, all right, anonymous source. Like, they have these incestuous relationships that just are there.
How about this? One other quick thing. Ken Delanian gets fired from the LA Times because he's writing stories and he's sending them to the CIA for approval before they go to his editor. He gets hired by NBC specifically for that. And what does he do with NBC? He is their like foreign policy, national security guy, the guy who's fired because he was a national security operative for the CIA, gets hired specifically to do that for NBC News and MSNBC. So that just tells you, come on.
Just outrageous. I remember when he wrote this article where he was talking about effectively the thrust of the article was that the Biden administration was lying to the American public.
Yes.
And he fashioned it as, this is information warfare. And it's like, okay, dude, are you serious? Are you serious? Are you really making that argument that lying, flagrantly lying? Like, he's acknowledging in the article that they are lying. And he's like, this is a new phase of information warfare that the Biden administration has used to go after and to get into Putin's head. It is utter nonsense.
Well, you know what's stupid about this? The thing about it is this. He's doing that to get into Putin's head and to confuse Putin. And I'm like, but Putin already knows whether it's true or not. If you say the Russians are doing this, well, doesn't Putin already know? He's the Russians, whether they're doing that. So you're not confusing him because he already knows the answer. That was aimed at us. We're the ones that don't know that. So you're like making a point. The Russians are really doing this. That'll confuse Putin. And Putin's sitting there like, well, I'm the one that's doing it, so I know if it's true or not. You're not confusing me, pal.
That's the wild part. And I think I even said the same thing. It's like, how's this? This is purely for American consumption. Yeah, and he's chest thumped it. He thought it was the greatest thing in the world. RFK. So this is RFK's secret push to prove the CIA killed my uncle. God bless him. God bless him. Those files should have been released a long time ago. I don't blame him. And you know what's wild about it? This is one of those things that a lot of people already believe, that the CIA was involved in JFK being killed. The files have been held up, 50, 60 years at this point, where they haven't released them. And it's like, okay, well, if there's nothing to see, why don't you just release the files? And yet they haven't released the files. Donald Trump said he's going to release them next time they go in. Donald Trump had the opportunity to do it last time, didn't do it. This time around, Trump says he's going to do it. RFK is in administration. I suppose he's going to be pushing Trump to do so. I approve of this. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, I approve of this. I mean, this is one of those things that the American public wanted to know, right? I mean, you have one of our main presidents, beloved presidents, get murdered. in broad daylight. And I don't believe for a moment that it was a single shooter. Give me your take on this. I think this is a good thing, personally.
Yeah, 100%. Here's the other part too. Everybody already knows the truth. You know what I mean? We all know. I mean, we like talk about it matter of factly. Well, they killed one president and they shot his brother. Everybody knows the truth. He would be just confirming what we already know. But this is something interesting because you got Kash Patel coming in saying what everybody else already knows, that basically the FBI is like an internal intelligence like the Stasi. It is an internal intelligence operation that is faking like it's a law enforcement agency. Like, yes, we're going after bank robbers and people who cross state lines doing crimes, when everybody knows it's just, it's an internal intelligence operation. So you have like one of the biggest threats to the U.S. empire ever. And here's what happened to me. Imagine if they'd missed JFK, how pissed he'd have been. You know what I mean? If they'd have shot him and he was like looking the other way and the bullet went right by his head, like happened recently, right? So now you have a president who you tried to JFK and he was like looking, hey, look over there. Bullet misses him, right? And the old, when you shoot at a bear, you better kill a bear, because if you miss him and your gun jams, you're in a bad situation, right? And that's what happened. Right. And so now you got Trump, who they tried to rub out apparently and weren't very successful, or so it appears. At least he believes, and a lot of other people believe that. So Trump's back and he wants his revenge. And Kash Patel's like, we're going to expose the CIA for what it is. And I mean, the FBI, and we're going to show all the truth about it. And I've, one time long ago on Fault Lines, I was there with Lee and this other guy. And we were talking about Russiagate early in the game. And I said, this is not an investigation. This is an intelligence operation against Donald Trump. I said, and if the truth of this would ever come out, it would be shocking to the conscience of the American people and the world. And it would make Watergate look like a traffic ticket, a non-moving violation, a traffic ticket for not having your seatbelt on. It is, they enlisted at minimum the UK, Australia, from the looks of things, probably Italy with this guy Mifsud. Who the hell is Mifsud? Maybe we'll finally find out. This guy, as I've said at the beginning, he's not a real person. He is an intelligence creation. There is no Joseph Mifsud. But bottom line is this: what the hell happens if we start finding out even one or two of these things? It is as disruptive as the release of these final JFK assassination files, which everybody knows will, they'll be just like probably a note from Alan Dulles saying, hey, let's shoot him on Thursday. Nah, I think it should be Tuesday. Like, holy crap, no wonder they didn't release it, right? But in reality, the stuff that could be found from Russiagate could be equally as upset, because the whole, we're the good guys. We're for democracy. You've got a democracy. We can't have somebody else interfering. We would never interfere in our elections. For all this to come out, now it would be good for the country. Yes, because maybe you have a chance then at, once this is out, kind of like an alcoholic or something that hits rock bottom and they can maybe go in another direction. I don't know. But I am not convinced that they're going to ever let Donald Trump take power because of the threat. Tulsi Gabbard, remember Tulsi Gabbard, a person who introduced a bill that was the Stop Arming Terrorists in Syria Act.
Yes. They're still smearing her today.
Imagine if she's got some horsepower in here. You know what I mean? And they go in and they start looking at the emails from Tony Blinken, that says, hey, Twitter, we need you to throw Garland Nixon off. I'm just being facetious, maybe not. Yeah. But you know what I'm saying? If they start looking at these emails, or they come in, they got to look this, they got to burn. They got to delete emails to military standards. You know what I mean? And they've wiped server. This is, if Trump actually gets in and actually gets some of these people in and they begin to do what they're saying they're going to do, I'm all for it. But, you just look at the power of the empire and the threat this is, and you wonder, are they going to let this happen? Are they going to do a coup? Are they just simply going to say, nah, we ain't letting Trump. We're just going to stick with we're going to go with Joe for a while and figure this thing out. I don't know. It wouldn't shock me.
I would argue they did try to coup. I mean,
Yeah,
like if
right.
you think
Yeah,
about it, they
yeah.
tried to reinvigorate Russiagate. They called the man a Hitler, everything but a child of God. They tried to whack him. And I know Democrats don't like to claim credit for that, but you can't necessarily blame Trump for January 6th, but not take credit for all of he's a dictator, he's a Hitler, he's going to end democracy, he's going to do this, he's going to do that. They tried to put him in jail, for God's sake. I mean, like the nonsense for the Hillary Clinton, the nonsense for the thing that Hillary Clinton effectively did in New York, and they turned it into a felony in order to try to put him in a cage. And you even heard Joe Biden say, well, the courts didn't do the job. And when you listen to Democrats, I was talking to a Democrat the other day, and she is like a clock. You know exactly what she's going to say because it's whatever they're talking about on MSNBC. And she says something like, yeah, the courts didn't do the job. Didn't do what job? You mean put him in jail? Like effectively, you wanted an extra constitutional way of getting rid of your opponent. And it wasn't that the cases that you were bringing were legit. You just needed him off of the playing field. You just needed him to go away because you didn't necessarily want to deal with the chance of running against him in the election. And between death, between lawsuits, between all of these cases that were basically brought against Donald Trump, he still won.
How about this?
So
You left one thing out.
Yeah.
They literally tried to throw him off the ballot. Remember that?
Well,
they were like, he
that's
can't
right.
be on the ballot in like Minnesota,
That's
in
right.
states that he won. After a while, they're just like, just take him off the ballot. Don't let him run. And it went to the Supreme Court and they said, you can't really do that. But I mean, they were like, just, hey, we're going to have a ballot and you can vote. Okay, whose name is on it? Joe Biden or Kamala Harris? Well, I want to vote for Trump. Nah, it's not allowed in this state. They tried to do, they just said, screw it. Who cares?
Yeah, they were using insurrection, something he was never even charged with. They're like, yeah, it was an insurrection. And I think if I remember correctly, it was the Secretary of State that decided it. She just randomly did it. It wasn't a court. It wasn't anything. Yeah, they did any and everything in their power to try to get rid of him and stopping him from getting into that office. Even up to the point of taking his head off.
Do you think this is something I think will be interesting?
Mm-hmm.
Like the cases against him, all of this stuff, that they'll find emails and stuff between the White House, because apparently the Atlanta people who were going after him in Georgia, they were in contact with the White House. There were meetings with the White House. What happens when and if they find a coordinated effort between the White House and the states, the DOJ and the state? I still believe in January 6th. One thing I won't forget, and that is when they were interviewing this woman from the FBI, and they said, how many FBI agents did you have a lot? How many? And she just said, I'm not going to answer that. And I'm like, I don't know, but I think we as Americans need to know. Was it 1? Was it 10? Did you have all this knowledge that it was going to happen, and you just said, oh, we're not going to do anything? Shh, you know what I mean? How much did they know? So you get the feeling that within all of these issues that were the most controversial, that there was an evil hand somewhere in that, saying maybe with some things, let's let it happen. Let's facilitate it. Hey, this guy's traveling here to do something. Let's just pretend we didn't see. You know what I mean? How much of that will we see?
The Ray Epstein was weird. That was super weird.
The FBI says we're not going to tell the constitutionally mandated body for oversight. The Congress is supposed to me, even that, when the FBI says to Congress, you can't do that, Congress is supposed to, we will yank all funding for the FBI. Oh, we can't? Yeah, well, then you can't operate because you don't get another dime. But Congress wasn't going to do that.
No, man, I agree with you. Look, I think this would be a fantastic thing because it's like, some of the people that Donald Trump are putting in are terrifying to me. By the same token, there's some people who I approve of. I mean, and it's rare that I approve of anybody that any politician has ever really put into position, right? Tulsi Gabbard, RFK, even, believe it or not, Ratcliffe. I mean, Ratcliffe was a big UFO guy. And Patel, well, so is Rubio, by the way. But I don't approve of Rubio as Secretary of State, but whatever. Patel has been I've been fascinated by the stuff that he's been saying. And I agree with you. If they go in and they're pulling out stuff like opening the closets and almost having like a church commission of sorts and revealing, saying, this is what these people were doing in these positions. This is why they were so aggressive. This is why the pardons were coming out. Yeah, it would be a clearinghouse for the country. I think that would be a positive thing, believe it or not. I mean, the Democratic Party has gotten to the point where they have become so corrupt, and the things that they have been doing, like they are losing the trust of the public in a real way, and I think you can see it in that election. And if they pull that stuff out and they're saying, yes, this was the largest psyop ever on the American public, trying to, Russia is working with Trump or going, helping Trump get elected, that is a big deal. I mean, they basically used that for 3 years to smear him and a broad section of the American public that was backing him on that front. That's a big deal. I mean, the
Remember,
51 intelligence officials. Okay, again,
which
that's
was
a
Tony
big
Blinken,
deal.
right?
Yeah,
Blinken was
Tony
behind that, wasn't
Blinken.
he?
Yeah. I
You
mean,
know what
so
else? Go ahead. Hey, one other thing I'm going to throw in. Remember when every other week we would hear the Russians have infiltrated, a power station in Connecticut or New Hampshire, right?
Rachel Maddow.
The Russians
Yeah.
are in this computer system every several weeks, and the Russians were like, "What the hell are you talking about? Why would we care about a power station in freaking New Hampshire, right?" And so, what happens if somebody looks into it and finds out that that was all to help build on Russiagate, that there's internal emails saying, if we accuse the Russians of this, this, and that, that'll make the public more angry at Russia. And then we can point Trump more, you know what I mean? And if the Trump people look into it and they find that, and I think if they did, they would, that all of these claims there was no substance or background to them. They were part of an elaborate media operation to basically criticize Russia constantly so they could continue to tie Trump to the bad guy. You know what I mean? I think that those constants, the Russians are hacking this, that, and the other stuff, was a lot of lies. There's just so many lies on top of lies.
Uh-huh.
What about all of the I tell you what I'd love to see them look into. Mm-hmm. Two things. The what was the guy, the Mueller investigation?
Oh, yeah. Trump and Russia.
That was dirty. That was dirty, 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 dirty. I'd love to see them look into that and all the things they did and the things that they found. The Durham investigation, which I said all along, the Durham investigation's job was to pretend to find a few things and give you a few tidbits, and then to wash it all under the, sweep it all under the carpet. And they look into that stuff. Right. And Kash Patel, I think, maybe I'm wrong, could all be lies, but I kind of think he would if he could.
He seems to be a true believer. I mean, either way you look at it, he seems to be a true believer. I mean, he's been saying he wants to investigate Zelensky. We've been giving him all of that money. What's going on with that situation? I don't think it's a coincidence at all that the pardon goes all the way back to 11 years for Hunter Biden. Again, if you get somebody like Kash Patel looking to Ukraine and he finds something illegal, okay, well, there may be people involved in that illegality that Joe Biden wants to pardon now. So,
you think there'll be a lot more pardons? Do you think there's going to be? I do. I think
so.
He has to, like Adam Schiff. People are like, why Adam Schiff? Why? Because he kept releasing classified stuff and internal information to the media. I think he's got to pardon a bunch of people, Comey, etc. One of the reasons is I read recently that the Trump administration said we got a lot of information on leakers from the last time around, and we're going to prosecute these people. Well, that sounds like Comey. That sounds like Schiff. These people it was just like leaks. It was like they were opening a dam to the information to the New York Times. Like they must have had their own desk at the New York Times and Washington Post where like all this Russiagate stuff was flowing in there. And if they start looking into leaks, usually I'm very big on allow the media to protect their sources. But if it's not the media, if the media is literally working with the government, in my opinion, that's not the media. That's doing an deliberate end around the First Amendment. And so I think I think there will be sweeping, Joe Biden just did 1,000 pardons or something of like former drug dealers and stuff like that. But I think he's setting the table so he can do all these pardons. Yes, I pardon drug dealers, blah, blah, blah. Oh, by the way, 500 people in my administration. I mean, he's got to.
I wouldn't be shocked at all. I mean, they said he's looking into it. And in their mind, Donald Trump is going to go after people. He said, well, maybe you should go after people if you guys were guilty. So, there's that. And yeah, I'm perfectly okay with, let's say, cleaning house, as it's sometimes called. It will bring some level of integrity to the system, a corruption purge, if you want to use those terms.
Yes.
And by the way, when they were releasing that stuff under Trump, the media loved it. Oh, more. Give us more information about Trump. And then now, though, you have, I forget, was it Jack Teixeira? And then there was one of the other leaks where they were
Yes, that's
literally
right.
hunting the kid down with CNN at the guy's house before the feds get to the house. Like astonishing changeover where media is working as an arm of the government, and weirdly enough, didn't like leaks. Like it's so bizarre. It's so
was
bizarre.
it Roger Stone? I think,
Yep.
if you remember,
At his house, at
CNN, it said, yes, we were tipped off by the FBI that they were going to do this raid. When I was in law enforcement, I remember a person that was prosecuted and fired. And the reason he was prosecuted and fired was because in a law enforcement officer, he tipped off somebody that a search was going to be coming, right? So if the FBI tipped off the media, we're going to search 512 Elm Street. The reason that's bad is because somebody could go over to 512 Elm Street and let the people know. And when the cops got there, they could be pointing machine guns out the window and just wipe them all out, right? You don't want somebody tipping someone that a raid or a search party is coming, because they could lie in wait and just mow them all down with machine guns. So whoever in the FBI tipped CNN, we're going to do a raid at Roger Stone's house, technically, that person ain't a cop at CNN. They could have called Roger Stone and said, hey, Roger Stone, the FBI is coming. And if he had stuff, he could have burned it. He could have destroyed it. He could have gotten rid of evidence. You see what I'm saying? So the FBI, no law enforcement agency should ever tip off someone that a raid is coming, and they tipped off CNN. Whoever tipped them off should be charged and fired, because they put the people who were doing the raid in jeopardy, and they put the evidence that they were coming to get. Not that I agree with what they did to Roger Stone, but I'm just saying from a law enforcement technical perspective, you are putting the entire operation at risk. If they called me and I had illegal stuff here, hey, they're coming to get you, Garland, at 12. Great, I'll flush all the drugs down the toilet.
Right. I mean, I just think it's unethical. Like, even beyond that point, I just think it's deeply unethical. It's like, why are you doing that? Like, what was it the function of law enforcement to alert media that they're going to take on a law enforcement action at 6 a.m? Like, why? Like, what? How does that fit within the context of your law enforcement duties? It does fit within the context of a propaganda exercise. It does not fit within the context of you just a law enforcement man. You're just there doing your job. I'm just there going into the house to get a guy because I'm told to do it. It's different. It takes it on a different level. It gives it a different context. The moment that the law enforcement feels the need, for whatever reason, to give media a heads up that they're going to somebody's house in a sting operation with guns ablazing. Not to mention they had guns ablazing on Roger Stone when they could have easily just sent him a warrant. He would have showed up at the police station. Like,
how about this? One other thing. Garland Nixon is a former investigator, right? And you say to me, Garland, I want you to handle this. Go to the FBI, figure this out, right? I'm going to get all of the emails. I'm going to interview people. And you know what I'm going to find out? Who gave the order and the okay? Where did it originate from? Yeah. Somebody somewhere said, here's the phone number, call Joe Blow at CNN, or somebody picked up the phone and called Joe Blow at CNN. I want to find out where that originated from, probably Comey or McCabe or one of these people, right? Because when I find out where that originated from, then I'm going after that person.
Yeah.
And now I want a lot of answers. And now I'm going to look at all of their contacts. I'm going to look at their phone calls. I'm going to look at their emails, and I'm going to find out, where did you get that phone number from? Have you contacted this person before? How many? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What happens? It isn't just the FBI in general that contacted somebody in CNN. It is a specific person that not only either called or gave the order to call. Now you get to that specific person and find out, why would you possibly do that? Have you done it before? How many times? Now that's when that investigation really exposes something bad, doesn't it?
Yeah. Were you paid to do it? Were you paid to do it? Meaning, do you have a relationship with this person where you give information for big stories that are coming down the pike? I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying it looks bad. Garland,
looks like it was part of a broader. Go ahead.
Oh no. You said it looks like it was
It's
part
part
of
of
a
a broader
broader
operation. Yes.
Agreed. Yeah, because otherwise, why are you doing that? I mean, I mean, to be fair, Roger Stone got himself in trouble himself. He shouldn't have added his own name to it, talking he was going to kill the man's dog, Credibil's dog. But it's so I don't mean to laugh. It's just funny. They just run the man's dog. Last question, Garland. This story out of Politico, I am fascinated by. So this is the AG one where they're pointing out that I think it was Bill Barr when he was doing looking for a leak. He went through and swept up journalists. I think he took Schiff's information. I mean, like taking phones, going through their messages, the works. And IG made the point of saying, "Yeah, too far, too far. You can't do no mess like that." And right here, Watchdog faults the DOJ in Donald Trump's first term for secretly obtaining records for lawmakers and for journalists. It is very dicey asking a journalist to give up their telephone or their cell phone, all of their contacts, all of their media contacts, anybody that they're engaged with, all of that stuff is going to be part of it. And you would think that a journalist has a mandate, a duty, ethical obligation to protect their sources. Okay, that's kind of hard to do when you're taking their cell phones and going through their information. I didn't think that was, well, I guess it is allowed, but clearly the DOJ or the watchdog is saying it's gone too far. I think this was Horowitz, if I'm not mistaken.
I find
Give me
it
a take on
interesting.
that. I mean, is that normal practice?
Probably is. You know what I find it interesting, and that is something that the FBI, the kind of stuff that the intelligence agencies constantly do, right? We find out from like WikiLeaks and stuff that they're doing all this stuff all the time. And now that Trump people say we're going to look into that, suddenly, oh, hey, look what happened during Trump's term, right? I read that as pushback in a way, saying, okay, this is the way I read it, that it's like this. Trump is going to look into all of these terrible things that happened under the Democrats or the Biden administration and all of this government overreach. Look at here's the story with government overreach during Trump. Now we know that what's his name, the guy that you just mentioned, that
Yeah,
he
it's
was
the
actually,
IG.
yeah, he was actually one of the operatives who were brought in, and he, you know, recently was like when Trump was running, was for Kamala Harris and saying all these bad things about Trump and all that kind of stuff. So I take him as part of the CIA cover-up operation. I mean, he has a history of CIA operations, Bill Barr. But my point is, I look at that and I say, sure, I'm sure Bill Barr did that. And I'm sure the NSA and all of them do that stuff all the time. But I think it's like a defensive move. Like, hey, this look what happened under Trump. And he's coming here and saying he's going to look at it. Well, he was doing the same thing. Well, you know what? Great. If Bill Barr was doing it, they need to look into it. And they need to look into what's going on. Look into all of it. Why turn any, you know what I mean? Why turn their back on any of it? Look into all of it. Hooray. Good. Thanks, Politico. Thank you very much. I think we should look into that. Also is the word. Also, we should look into that along with everything else.
Right. That's an and.
Exactly.
That's combining it with something else. Yeah, I mean, but there's still no consequences for it. It's like, yeah, this was improper. All right, what's next? You know, that's the way they look at it. Garland, man, I always enjoy these conversations, man.
Yeah,
I swear
it's a
to God, I
blast.
do. Garland Nixon, he is a political analyst. You can catch him on his own YouTube channel, Garland Nixon. I'm sure by the same name. It is doing God's work, and I really appreciate you, man. Thank you for this.
All right. Talk to you soon.
You too. Have a good one.